Hey up everyone, Magpie Gaming here. I hope you're all doing well. In this video I'm going to break down the recent podcast that Nikita did along with, Pestily did and Nikita joined in. This was one of the team podcasts that Pestily does where other streamers go on and they chat about Tarkov and Tarkov related things. This week, however, they had Nikita join them as a special guest. So I'm going to kind of condense it because the actual podcast itself was 2 hours long. So hopefully I'm going to be nowhere near that long, but I'll condense it to as great a degree as I can so you guys are not having to listen to me waffle on. There was a lot said in this podcast though, so I've pulled out the main juicy parts. One thing I will say though is that in recent times when these podcasts have been done, I haven't bothered with them, I haven't watched them. I've waited for somebody else to do a breakdown, put it up on the forum, then I've done a quick scan through the podcast myself, picked out the juicy bits and done my videos that way. This time I actually sat and watched this podcast from the beginning to the end, and I'm really glad that I did. Now, these long podcasts are not for everybody, but what I will say is, and I will put a link in the description below to the podcast, is if you are in any doubt about the passion that Nikita has for Escape from Tarkov as a project, then you should definitely watch this podcast, and you will come away with no doubt to the passion that he has for it and the current frustration that he feels for it with certain things that are going on with the game and the community right now. These are things that I'm going to get into, but it was very, very good to see the raw emotion that he had come out in this video. And I mean, I've been somebody that slated Battlestate games in the past, not greatly, you know, they make changes sometimes and I haven't liked them and I've voiced my opinion, but it definitely makes you think twice about doing that when you see and hear the frustration in his voice at some of the things that are going on. So they spoke about a lot of things in this, and one of the things that Nikita spoke about was the actual image that Battlestate has at the moment. He's always wanted them to be very open and honest with the community. He feels at the moment that maybe they're a little bit too open and honest because they do get slated for basically everything they do. He says even when they're trying to do something that's good for the community, he says they will get slated. Now, one of the things that was pointed out was that everything that he read was on Reddit, and a lot of the streamers that were on this podcast, I think there was Ghost Freak, Slush Puppy, Anton, Sigma, and of course Pestily, they all said one of the things that he really shouldn't do is go to Reddit and read it because it's just so toxic on there. And he says a lot of the stuff on there is toxic, but he likes to read through that stuff because every now and again there will be a quite heartwarming message, and those are the ones that he likes to see. But obviously he wants to hear from the community what's going on with the game. He wants to get ideas to better the game, and he gains a lot of knowledge from reading things such as Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. But obviously the criticism is one thing that's kind of getting them down at the moment, and he spoke at length about the criticism that's thrown at them. He says he doesn't think some of it is warranted, he thinks some of it is very over the top, some of it is very personal, and as much as he tries not to let him affect him, it does. But I think one of the things is that at the moment they are not working back in the studio. Lockdown in Russia has been relaxed enough for them to go back to the studio, but he hasn't called the staff back in yet. He doesn't really go into specifics as to why he's not called them back into the office. I think he's just letting people, you know, have some time at home, spend time with families and that, because they do work 6 days a week doing this game. But the other thing is that he feels that maybe there just isn't enough that they can do right now because of things that they're having to do with the game, which is tackle the cheating issue. They're tackling that to the point now where it'd be pointless going into the actual studio to develop parts of the game because they just don't have the time to do it because they're tackling the cheats all the time. But I think having all of this time at home, being quarantined, being away from people, has meant that he's had more time on his hands to read a lot of the negative stuff that's out there. Maybe when he's in the office there's more of a distraction to that, and obviously there'd be a camaraderie, there'd be people to tell him, you know what, don't take no notice of that, Nikita, ignore them. But when you're sat on your own, there's nobody to tell you that, so things can maybe sink in a little bit more than they should and affect you more than you should let them. So I think maybe that's one of the things that's affecting him at the moment. But he speaks about the recent drop events, and he said that just after they started the drop events, they had a massive surge in cheats using the game, and he said that was because they were able to get the free items and things like that, and they were able to get these free items and obviously sell them through the RMT websites to other people. They could go into raid and pass them on to them. So they forced encryption on the game. This was end-to-end encryption from you and their servers and back again. Obviously this had a degradation in performance on the game, it had server issues, and he said, you know, they took a lot of criticism for that, but it was a step that they had to take to ensure that the game wasn't overrun with the hackers. So he said that the encryption was broken within 24 hours, but they managed to upgrade it, and so far it's holding fairly well. He then again spoke about the criticism towards the game and things like that, but Pestily made a good point, which was that a vast amount of people that are currently talking about the game, currently criticising it, will be people that came along around the holiday period, around December, January, when they had the first drop events. You had a lot of prominent streamers start to play the game. It brought a lot of new people in, and maybe some of those that are criticising the game at the moment are some of these new people that came in. They're maybe unhappy with the way the development of this game goes. Now, as somebody that's played the game for 2 years plus now, I know how the development goes. I know that they can change their mind on a whim. I know that they will change mechanics within the game very quickly, and I know that there's a lot of silent updates. You know, I'm kind of used to it sometimes not working as well. So it could be that a lot of these new people simply don't understand it, and they're like, well, why are you doing this? This isn't what happens in the development of other games, etc, etc. So it could be, as Pestily says, a lot of these new people just simply don't understand it, and it's just taking them a little while to get their heads around how Battlestate do development of this game. But he did speak about the criticism a lot, and he says it does get to them. They hate having to fight fire all the time on all fronts, and he said they could look into getting hold of hiring a PR company to do the PR for them, but he says he wants to do it himself because he wants people to feel like they are listening, they are engaging with, you know, the community, which they are. And like I say, if you watch this video, if you're in any doubts, definitely watch it, and it probably will change your mind as to if you've got a negative feeling towards them. If you listen to what he says, it probably could change your mind. So he talks at length about the RMTs. These are the real money traders. These are people that sell in-game items and money for real world cash. There are a lot of them about at the moment. He says that they're basically waging a war, you know, against them right now, and it's one that they're slowly starting to win. He says that changes that they've made to the game are hitting them pretty hard at the moment. Obviously there are mechanics in the game that these guys exploit. Obviously Battlestate changed those mechanics, and those guys have to come up with something new. He says unfortunately though, he understands the anger from the legit players, because it's the legit players that are getting hit with these changes. So he says that it's just something that they have to do right now to try and combat these people. Obviously one of them was the ping limit. That stops people in certain regions gaming with people in other regions, and he says he's really sorry that that has happened, but it's had to be a necessary step that they take in order to localize the cheats so that these cheats are losing out on business. You know, if you wanted to use an RMT that's based in Europe and you live in America, you'd struggle to use them while this low, you know, this ping setting is on, because they wouldn't be able to get things to you, etc. So he says that they've raised it by 10 milliseconds, which I'd reported in a previous video. He understands that that won't help a lot of people, but he also understands that it will help a few people game, but he also admitted that that will then allow the RMTs to push in a little bit further. So it's just a constant war, and us as legit players are just caught in the middle of it. And like I say, watching this video, you kind of like, you know what, yeah, I am on your side, Nikita. You do what you need to do to get rid of these people. Yes, it's going to affect us, but the game is still very much playable. It is in a really good state. There's just some mechanics that we've got to put up with right now, and hopefully it won't be forever. So like he says, a lot of the silent updates, the majority of those are done to combat these RMTs. They obviously won't tell us what's in these updates, because then it would give these RMTs a heads up and would give them, you know, a kind of clue on how to battle what they're doing. So they will roll out these invisible updates, as they call them, and this is to combat the RMTs. It's not a content update or anything like that. They're just changing how the game works so that they can combat these guys. So another change that they've done recently as well is that you can't put a backpack inside a backpack. Now that was something that you could always do in the game. You would kill somebody, you would take your backpack off, put it in theirs and take that, so you get an extra bag out, you know, that's part of your loot. You're unable to do that right now at the moment. Obviously a lot of people aren't happy about that, but this is one of the ways that these RMTs work. They use the backpacks that are slightly smaller once they're placed inside, and they do that to give them a lot of space. And I have noticed quite a lot recently in games where I've gone in and there's been dead PMCs, and they will have 6-7 backpacks all inside each other, and I'm thinking, you know, this is a bit odd. But now I know that these possibly was RMT people and the buyers and the sellers, so, and they've just got what they needed to get and quit the game or whatever, I don't know, or they've been killed and looted. So yeah, that's one of the things that we can't do right now, but that's all in a good cause. It is annoying, I get that, but hopefully it's something that won't last forever. Nikita talked about the release of the game. I think it was Slush Puppy, I might be wrong who asked him, when will the game actually release, and Nikita said that game development had slowed significantly because of having to combat the RMTs. He said they did look at wanting to release the game this year. He says they're maybe looking at next year, but for the moment they don't really have a fixed date or a fixed clue as to when it could come out next year, because they're just putting so much into fighting the cheats and the RMTs. He says roughly 65 to 70% of their workload now is fighting cheats, which doesn't leave much for game development, so obviously it's slowed things down a lot. Then they started to speak about some sort of more light-hearted stuff. The RMTs and the criticism was quite a heavy conversation that was had by Nikita. As I say, a lot of passion, a lot of frustration came out in his voice, and the way he was, looking on the camera, you could tell this was one very, very frustrated guy. So they lightened the mood a little bit and started to speak about other things. Nikita spoke about the raid loading times. He says that he understands that sometimes these can be very long, but he says the reason is that when all of the players are loading in, the servers have to load your loadout into it, then your loadout has to be loaded into every other player's instance of the game. So he says sometimes there is a lot of loading to do, and you're basically just waiting on the slowest person to load in and have loadouts loaded to them. So he says he does understand that it can take a while sometimes, and it's not something that they can really change right now, but they did say that they would be moving to Unity 2019 in patch 12.8, and he said there are network performance things that they can do in that version that will help them to sort of decrease raid load times. Sometimes they're just always going to be long because of connection issues and whatever, but he says it is something that they understand is happening and they will look to work on in the future. He also confirmed on the podcast that the PMC limit on factory has been dropped to 4 to 5 PMCs. It is no longer 6 like it used to be. As I said in a recent video, there'd been some criticism that a 5-man squad could go into factory and basically just farm it. They'd only have one other PMC to bother with, so they've lowered the PMC limit to 5, but obviously a 5-man squad can still go in and just farm all of the scavs in there, but again you wouldn't be getting maybe the juicy loot from one PMC. Whether that's going to be a permanent thing or not, I'm not too sure, but for right now it's just been lowered to 4 to 5. Nikita did say that there are instances where you might end up with 6 PMCs on, because he said there's a bit of a glitch in the system right now. It will still now and again let 6 on, but it should just be limited to 5. They spoke about the new patches that are coming. 12.6.2 he says will contain the new quest for Prapor. He says this will most likely give you the grenade launcher once you've completed this, plus he said there'll be some fixes in there as well for the game. He spoke a fair bit about the grenade launcher, but I wasn't listening too much because I'm not really bothered about it. A lot of people are kicking off about the grenade launcher, but I think it'll add something new to the game. I don't think people are going to be running around with it like they are with pistols and rifles. I think it's going to be one of these things that you maybe see now and again, and I think it's going to be a bit like when somebody lets off a full clip in an M4, you think, oh yeah, that sounds sexy, and it draws other PMCs in, and I think that's what a grenade launcher will be as well. People will see it as a challenge if they take that person down using that. So it's personally not going to be something that I'm going to use. I might give it a go just for a laugh now and again, but if I hear somebody using it, I'm going to run the other direction. I'm not going to run towards them, but I think a lot of people will. So I think it's going to be one of those niche guns that'll be, it'd be good for the memes and things like that, but usually most people just won't bother with it. For 12.7 patch, he says it's not quite ready yet. They are still working on the customs expansion, but he says it's not just an expansion to the map, it's a complete overhaul of the map. He says they're redoing the lighting on there. It could be that scav locations and things like that are moved and switched out. Could be that we have new spawns and extracts as well, and that the older ones are maybe changed and moved around. So we'll have to wait for that. And he also said with that patch we will get the new boss Sanitar, who will be based on Shoreline. We didn't really get any more information on the new boss other than that. He spoke about 12.8, which I've just spoke about. That will bring into it the new Unity 2019. The Vector is planned for that patch, and Nikita admitted that they have a lot of weapons ready to go, but they're holding off at the moment because obviously they're having to battle the RMTs. If you was just to drop new weapons, attachments and things like that into the game, I think it would push more RMTs at the game, because obviously people would want those and the attachments that go with them. So I think it's just holding off for now, but he says they do have a lot of weapons ready to go and we will get the Vector very soon. They spoke about the smoke grenade. He said he understands that the smoke grenade is very slow to go off and not realistic at all, but he says it is based on a Russian smoke grenade, and he joked that they are shit in real life. But he says the reason it's so slow is because in order to do, the fast explosion of smoke, he says it brings the FPS right down. down. He says they do have a Western variant modelled and ready to go, but they need to do some more work graphically so that it doesn't reduce FPS performance on the map to a crawl. So that's something that they're looking at, but with no idea when the new smoke grenade will be implemented. They was asked about the next wipe, and he says they have absolutely no day or time in mind for the next wipe. He says it is a long way away right now. He was asked about the next iteration of Steam Audio. He says it's been worked on, but he says Steam Audio is CPU bound at the moment, and he says obviously changing that up means that the CPUs will be hit harder, and that in turn reduces the overall performance of the game. So he says it's something that they're trying to get their head around, and a new iteration of it will come eventually, but he says it's just going to take time and effort. So for now we will have the option to either turn it on or turn it off. He did say though that once Steam Audio is fully implemented, we won't have that option anymore. It will just be on permanently. He was asked about voice over IP, and he said at the moment that is on hold. He says they have absolutely no date for when that could be implemented. He definitely, due to his mannerisms on the actual cam, didn't look like he's got any intentions of adding it to the game at all, to be honest. I think it's something that they felt would be a really good idea, and then they've decided, you know what, maybe it wouldn't be that good of an idea. So I think they're holding off at the moment with that for now. And he was also asked about Raid Episode 4. He said that is ready to go, they just don't have a release date for it at the moment. And that was pretty much all the juicy bits in this podcast. As I say, a lot of raw emotion came out of Nikita, a lot of frustration was shown. His love and passion for Escape from Tarkov is plain to see if you was to watch the video, definitely. And you know, I kind of felt sorry for the guy. You know, he had an idea of a game 5 years ago now it was when he started the development. You know, a couple of people joined him on it. Now he's probably got what I would think is the most advanced game studio in Russia, definitely on the go. He's got 100 plus people working for him. He has a game that regularly tops the viewership charts on Twitch. You know, it's played around the world, it's got a massive following, and it's just a shame that there's a certain amount of people that are trying to ruin that by cottoning onto it and trying to make money out of it. He says some of these RMT people have even had the nerve to contact him and say, you know what, we're good for your game, leave us alone. So, but he doesn't want that in the game. It isn't what he wants. You know, that's not his vision of the game. It ruins it for the fair people and the legit players. So like I said at the start of my video, definitely try and give that podcast a watch if you can, and you'll just see the raw emotion that he has. It was really, really good to see. And that is pretty much it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I know I've rattled on for quite a long time. I'm really sorry about that, but there was a lot to say in this. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.